power. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. I bear witness that without Allah there is no God. I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is the last, the final messenger of Allah, after whom no prophet old or new will come. And I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I have recited a verse of the Quran from chapter 7, verse 31. And I translate it as follows. Descendants of Adam, pay attention to your complete clothing at each time or place of prayer. The word that means time or place of prayer is masjid. Also, dine and sip without being wasteful. Allah does not love those who are wasteful. The Quran is a book that gives us guidance in every aspect of our life, but it's not a book of do's and don'ts, merely giving rules and regulations. Whenever the Quran gives teachings, it gives concepts and ideas, it is for the purpose of the individual, each individual and as a community as well, to use the reason in applying the injunctions of the Quran. That is why the Quran says, La ikraha fid din. There's no compulsion. In other words, you're not told to do something and you have to do it. You are told to do something and you must want to do it. You must accept it willingly. The Quran says that don't do things with an unwilling mind. Now the impact of the teachings of Islam very often in the modern world is not really seen in a positive light. And sometimes we focus on just little areas of conflict because that is what makes the news. We don't realize that Islam has an impact upon millions of people, perhaps billions, in a positive way, where they can live in peace and harmony and not hostility. One such example is that in the south of India, there is a town of about 40,000 people. I don't know if you'll call it a city, but certainly it's a town, a large town. That town was occupied by Muslims ever since the time of the Prophet Muhammad. Just about the 9th year of Hijrah, and he died about the 10th or 11th year of Hijrah. So some of his companions migrated, went to India, and influenced the people. There were people living there already, influenced them. And so in that town, there are over 80, perhaps 90% Muslims. There are some Hindus and some Christians and people of other faith systems. What is unique about that town? And it's called Kayalpatinam. What is unique about that town? From the time it was occupied by Muslims, in the year 630 of the Common Era, until now, there are no police stations in that town. There are no cinemas in that town. There are no liquor shops in that town. And people live in complete harmony one with another. It's easy to verify this information because it is well known, and there have been people who have explored this area. There are videos, there are photographs, and there are comments, and there are explanations of the fact that these people, not only have they lived Islam, not requiring police stations, not requiring cinemas, and not requiring any liquor shops whatsoever in the area, and they have lived a happy life, contented. They may not be wealthy or rich, some of them probably are. But it shows the impact upon civilization, on people, when they hold firmly to the principles and the teachings of the Quran, and their history of scholars and mystics and Sufis and knowledgeable persons are there on record. Their tombs are there. Their knowledge of Arabic, they speak perhaps Tamil language or one of these, but there are many of them who know Arabic. There are mosques in the area. And it is important for us to really focus on two things that are important in our physical self. The Quran says, attend to your full dress. That is, pay attention to your complete clothing at each time of prayer, each masjid. And masjid doesn't only mean a place, as for example this building. It means even if you are praying at home, that particular area that you are praying in, whether you sit on a chair, whether you use a mat, however you pray, that's your masjid. We don't have to do as other faith systems do, put up a little building in front of the house and put whatever necessities are there for prayer. Muslims can pray anywhere. The whole world is a mosque for us. So that the Quran says that pay attention. Everything has its appropriate time and place. You go to the beach, you'll wear a different attire. If you go to the mall, you'll wear a different attire. If you go to a cold country, you will have a different attire. If you go to other parts of the world, you will find that you may dress differently depending upon the circumstances, the condition. You go to a hospital, you find that you have to wear perhaps no clothes at all, or just a gown that sometimes doesn't even cover you completely. But the Quran says at the time of prayer, you should focus on the fact not only of your physical clothing, but the Quran speaks of another garment, another kind of clothing when it speaks of the libas al-taqwa, the garment of risk management. I often translate that word taqwa as risk management. Taking all the precautions. Taking precautions of the weather. You may be in an air-conditioned room and it's very cool and you need to put on something a little warmer. It may be very hot. You may need to put on a fan. All of these things are preparing for prayer so that you are comfortable. So it is not a matter of just looking literally at what the Quran is saying, that you have to wear this or you have to wear that. You have to take into circumstances the environment. You have to take into circumstances other people. For example, on Eid Day, it is recommended that people use perfume. One of the reasons for that is that people sometimes they perspire and they may, give out a bad odor because there are so many people crowded together. And you know what happens when in that case. In our case, in many cases now you have air conditioning, so you don't have that problem as such. But long ago, we know on Eid Day they would give to children even little attar or perfume, so that the place, the environment is something which is sweet smelling and clean, and it is an environment in which your mind also can be sweet and prepared for prayer. Now, it is important for us to realize, as I've mentioned in previous sermons about halal and haram, that halal and haram doesn't apply to meat alone. It applies to everything, all kinds of food and even behavior and other things. And one of the things, for example, that is considered haram and is not meat is, of course, wine. In fact, the Quran not only speaks about it being haram, but it speaks of gambling as well. And the word used for gambling is maisir. And maisir doesn't only mean drawing of lots or lottery or whatever it is that people involve themselves. It means trying to get something. Maisir comes from the Arabic word yasar, which means easy. to get things easily, whether by robbery, whether by cheating, whether by just guessing, you get something easy. And of course, the Prophet Muhammad has taught us that actions are judged according to intention. What is important is that anything that you do, you must use your reason. You have to make the judgment as to whether this is appropriate, whether this is right, whether this is sufficient. Could I do more, or am I doing sufficiently? And that decision, that choice is yours and yours alone. Sometimes that choice is dependent, of course, on the environment in you are. There are certain standards that are accepted in court, in certain public places, in the mosque, in different areas. There are certain standards that are expected, and therefore one needs to respect those standards. But the use of alcohol is condemned in the Quran. Now, again, this is where we have to use our reason. The Quran speaks about alcohol and tells us that it has benefits and it has disadvantages. But the disadvantages are greater. Now, it means that alcohol is not something that is banned. It is banned for consumption as a food, as people normally associate it with any food they're having. They have to have some wine or whiskey or whatever it is. That is not necessary. In fact, Allah has given us so many things to drink, so many fruit juices. It is only one drink that He has forbidden, and that is things containing alcohol. And even then, alcohol in certain circumstances is permissible, as I've mentioned last week, for example, in the case of medication. And if it is not consumed but used for rubbing on the skin or so, it has other uses. The Quran says there are advantages in it, and it's perfectly permissible to use it for these purposes. But the reason why the Quran does not allow the consumption of alcohol is because it is called khamar. First of all, that word khamar is not really alcohol. It is correctly translated as intoxicant. Intoxicant means something which is toxic. Toxic means poison. If it is used as a healing, it's not a problem. But if it is used as a poison, and it does poison, we know the consumption of alcohol is such that in fact it damages the kidney, the liver, it gives cirrhosis of the liver, and most important, it damages the mind. We have seen and know drunk people, how they move and how they walk. In fact, I've often given a story of a priest who once said to his son who came home drunk one night. And he said to him, look at your condition. You came home, your mother has prepared dinner for you, you didn't even eat it, you can't, you're falling down, you are even worse than a dog. Well, that put a shock in the young man's mind, and he said to his father, he said, you're a priest, and that is how you're going to talk to your son? That is the analysis you'll give, that is the estimation, the value I have? And he says, yes. The father says, yes, I can prove it to you. And he said, how? So he told the wife to bring a plate of food and an empty plate. So she brought the boy's food and she brought an empty plate. And the priest took some whiskey and put it in the empty plate and said, call the dog. The dog came, smelled the whiskey and ate the food. He said, look, even a dog knows the difference between what is good for it and what is bad for it. Now, it may be a story, but the point is it emphasizes the fact that we have to make choices in life. And there's a choice of eating that which is good and eating that which is bad. I recall when I first came to this area, this mosque, this Jamaat, our elders, almost 50 years ago, I didn't know at the time, but I was told afterwards, that many of them, alcohol was their daily life. They would imbibe alcohol, they will drink it. Sometimes on special occasion, their friends when they're coming from work, whatever it may be. But having explained the fact that its effect on them, I think almost all of them, with one or two exceptions, almost all of them gave up the drinking of alcohol. And the Quran points out to us in one place. It says about gambling, and it speaks about alcohol, and then it says, they ask you what you can spend. And the Quran says, al-ufu, what you can spare. And I pointed out to them, and this is what built this Anjuman really, that instead of spending your money on alcohol, which damages your health, and on gambling, which gives you nothing but makes other people rich, why don't you donate it or give it as a subscription every month to the mosque? What you can spare it, because if you can use it for things which are not for your family and not even beneficial to yourself, that same money, whether it is 5 cents, 10 cents in those days, $1, I don't know what liquor was in those days, 50 years ago, but whatever money you can utilize it for the cause of Islam, and you get blessings for it. And they all, as I said, probably 99% of them did that, and it is what has built and carried on this mosque. Jamaat was expanded, mosque was rebuilt, and the Jamaat changed their whole approach and attitude in how they live the religion of Islam. Some years ago, I visited at the time, the head of the Presbyterian Church was a good friend of mine, and he said to me, he said, I always admire Muslims in the way in which you raise funds. You have bazaars, you have curry queues, or Chinese queue, whatever it is, but you don't sell alcohol. And you raise so much money. He said, in our church, they insist they must have a bar. But according to the constitution of the Presbyterian Church, you're not allowed to sell alcohol or consume alcohol on church property. And he said, I have banned it in certain places because I've learned from the Muslims. Of course, there were others who overruled him, and they tried to get around it. But the important thing is that the Quran speaks of alcohol as khamar. And khamar means that which clouds your intellect. The reason why it is because it clouds your intellect. We know that when you take certain medications, you are warned that you must be careful in operating machinery. You must be careful in driving. It can make you drowsy. It may not necessarily be alcohol. And remember, alcohol has different forms. All alcohol is not necessarily, it can't even be drunk. There are alcohol which are waxes. There are higher levels of alcohol. There are alcohol which are used as for rubbing alcohol and other things like that. The alcohol that is normally used for drinking is ethyl alcohol, and many people don't know that a product that is used and even sold by Muslims that contains perhaps the most amount of alcohol is what we call Angostura bitters. That has 44% alcohol. Is there in fine writing on the bottle, and many Muslims don't realize that. But of course it is used in very small amounts compared to people drinking a glass of whiskey or so, where the alcohol content may be less, but the quantity that people consume is much more. So that when the Quran points out to us the use of alcohol and even of gambling, but we focus more on food, as we have been discussing in the last couple of khutbahs. When the Quran mentions about khamar, it means that it tells us that it is the work of shaitan. It is the amal shaitan. Now what is shaitan? Many people think shaitan is some strange being that come and instigate you to do certain. No, shaitan is the environment outside there that acts against your interests. So you find a person is riding his or her bicycle and going down the road, and a friend meets him and said, come, let's take a drink. And that is a member of the Anjuman once told me, he said, sometimes I'm passing and someone says, come and take a drink, or I feel to go and take a drink. He said, but then the Quran doesn't come and hit me on my head. But I think for a moment that Allah has forbidden me this. Why should I do that? And it is that willpower of mine that makes me drive past quite quickly. So some shaitans are those environments that are there. People place themselves in environments, in parties and other occasions where alcohol is served, and they are influenced, weddings and these things, they are influenced in that way. Of course, if that is the purpose of religion, to develop a strong willpower, and that is what we will do during the month of Ramadan and fasting. So it doesn't mean that a person cannot attend a restaurant where alcohol is sold, or go to a party where alcohol is served. I have attended many of these, and I don't drink at all. I've never drunk alcohol in my life. So it is possible to develop yourself in such a way that you feel proud that I can withstand the works and the influence of those negative influences, that shaitan, as it were. So the Quran points out to us, however, that there's another type of intoxication, if you want to call it that, but it's not really toxic, it's not poisonous. And that is called, as used in the Quran, the word used is sukara. The word sukara comes from sukar, which means sugar. And of course we know we get alcohol, rum from sugar. But sukara means also, other than chemicals, other than wine and whiskey and all of these things that can, beer and anything that contains ethyl alcohol and can close your mind, there are other things that can influence your thinking. And it uses the word sukara and said, don't go near prayer until wa antum sukara, and you are bazudi, as we say, you're not in your right mind. And what are some of these things? Sleep, for example. If you're feeling sleepy, or if you're feeling hungry, you can't concentrate on prayer, or if you're very tired, you find that you go through just emotions of prayer and you can't fall. So that is what sukara is. So it is not the same as kamar, which means chemical intoxication. The Quran also speaks of, in addition, it speaks of the other circumstances in which you cannot concentrate on a prayer. But then the Quran tells us with regards to eating and drinking, it says, وَكُلُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ وَكُلُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا. People often focus on the halal and the haram, and they unfortunately apply it only to meat. But as I've explained previously, halal and haram has nothing to do with meat alone. It is that which is permissible. There are even actions which can be halal and actions which can be haram. And the Quran says, don't say this is halal and that is haram. And it also points out to us that when we eat, that we should mention the name of Allah, not when we kill an animal. It says if an animal is killed and other than the name of Allah is mentioned, don't eat it. If another person or another thing's name is mentioned when the animal is being slaughtered. But the Quran does say and tell us that you can, especially with regards to pilgrimage and Qurbani, you mention the name of Allah and we say Bismillah Allahu Akbar. Or even if Jews were to say, you know, the one God, or mention the name of one God over it, or Christians, anybody, if the name of Allah is mentioned, name of God is mentioned, that becomes lawful. So the Quran says here that something must not only be halal, it must also be tayyib. Kulu, eat, consume, mimma razaqnahum, for what Allah has given you, which is halal, which is permissible, is lawful for you, and it is also tayyib. And what is tayyib? Tayyib means that which is appealing, that which is tasty, that which is healthy, that which is well prepared. Something may be halal and the way it is presented to you, you don't even feel to eat it. You turn your mind. You might serve it in a dirty plate or a dirty cup. And it might be very helpful and nutritious or so, but the way in which it is presented is not tayyib. For you at least. Perhaps others may enjoy it. This is, again, each individual's decision. And so the Quran tells us that food should really be well prepared, well presented, and it should be pleasing. And it should be also tasty. Food that is tasteless sometimes has become difficult. Sometimes people go to different places. Some people complain about hospital food, for example, that is tasteless. It may be healthy and nutritious for you, but the incentive to eat it may be different because of your condition and your circumstances, as the case may be. What the Quran points out to us, however, is that food affects our emotions. Just as we have, for example, certain drinks that will give you energy. We call it energy drinks. It affects your spirit. We take sometimes certain things that can give you a rush of energy, or something can be, you may eat certain foods and it makes you lazy, it makes you lackadaisical. So that food does have an effect upon our emotions, all foods. Some of them may be manifested, may be seen in much different way. But for example, if one takes pork, why is it forbidden? It is permissible under certain circumstances, as we have explained before. But the reason why pork is forbidden is because it affects our emotions. Whatever the animal does comes into us. The pork lives under very filthy conditions, and in the consumption of it, the persons who consume it become very filthy themselves in their morals, in their behavior. And that is why we are seeing so much immorality in the society today, because of the large consumption of pork. I've been told recently that pork is one of the cheapest meats. I don't know if it's because people are not buying it and they're selling it, or because so many people are buying it, it is available. Now people say, well, you can rear them under certain circumstances which are clean and so on. One of the things that I've been told by an agriculturist who was a former head of our Anjuman, and he said he had studied these animals. That was his field of study, and he said they will even eat their own filth. So that kind of, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad has pointed out to us that if you look at society at large, you will see that people who eat meat are a little more courageous and forward than people who don't eat meat. They become mild and they become, very peaceful in a sense. And those who eat meat, and you see it in different communities and circumstances. So that we are told that food affects our emotions. Some people ask the question, well then, why has Allah created the pig? If it is forbidden, well, He didn't create it for it, but the pig is a very useful animal. It doesn't mean, as some Muslims think, you mustn't touch it, have nothing to do with it. That's not so. A person can mind pigs because it has a very useful purpose. The purpose of, just as we have seen, Allah has created birds in such a way that they clean up the environment. Kobos, for example, will come and eat all the dead animals, dead chickens or so you have, they will come and eat it. And other birds, ravens and other things that are flying, they see it. And dead fishes or so, you'll see them on the beach. They come and they eat it. They clean up the environment in that way. One of the biggest problems of the world today is garbage and garbage disposal. And if garbage dumps were really to be allowed pigs to be reared there, they will eat up all the garbage because they eat anything. They eat wood, they eat plastic, they eat everything. And it converts it into, manure, which can be used. So the pig is a very useful animal. It's not condemned, it's condemned for eating purposes, but it is a very useful animal in the environment. And with the focus on environment today, perhaps Muslims should come forward and try to change people's attitude towards pig and let them know that it has a purpose, and that purpose is to help in the environment. And then the Quran also points out to us, and among Muslims there's another terminology that is used that again it's a choice of the individual, and that word is the word makruh, which comes from karaha. Karaha means to dislike, and this word means something which is displeasing, something which is disliked or which is held in aversion. Now, even though food might be halal, even though it might be tayyib, well prepared or so, sometimes you're not in a mood for that particular type of food, or you don't want to eat it. Some people don't eat beef, they eat chicken. Some people don't eat chicken, they eat beef. Some people don't like goat, some people don't like pumpkin, some people don't like karaili. That is a choice of the individual. Everybody cannot eat the same food all the time. Some people like bread, some like roti. Different cultures have their different standards and different methods. So that the Quran is a book that is giving us all of this guidance, and there are much more in the Quran with regards to this. It gives us much more about clothing, about behavior, about eating and drinking. It's a wide study, but it's important for us to know the basic principle is when the Quran gives us certain guidance and guidelines, it is not do it and do as I say and do as I do. Allah says it, but He does it also. He allows people to eat pork. He allows people to do certain things. He gives them that choice. That is a choice that Allah has given to each and every one. Of course, the effects of it, they will have to suffer. When they suffer with different ailments, a person consumes alcohol, they will suffer cirrhosis of the liver, or even if they don't, it affects you later on. If you have a heart attack or so, your risk of getting better and utilizing medication is greater. That you find that you're unable to have the medication function properly. And the doctors will tell you that if you're under certain medications, stay away from alcohol, because it counteracts the medication or even makes it worse and more poisonous. So that this is how the Quran is a book of guidance that the world needs today, because we live in a world of confusion. We live in a world in which people are trying to make their own rules and regulations, and every day they are changing the laws, changing the rules, and still not understanding what is happening. Of course, it is doing a lot for people, because it gives doctors jobs, it gives other people the ability to build medicines and vaccines and equipment and all of these things. So it boosts the economy. And that is one of the things that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad pointed out to us as the Mujaddid of the age. He said, we are living in an age of materialism. People's focus is on the material aspects of life. Nothing is wrong with that. That is a good thing. But put religion above materialism. Look after your own soul. The Quran says, take care of your souls. Look after your moral and spiritual development. There are opportunities here, but the main thing is that the choice is each individual as to how I want to grow and how I want to grow so far as my community and society and my family is concerned. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim. Wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikr al-hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun kareem, malikun barurufur rahim. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم اللهم اخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أعلى أكبر